Well, hello there, and I do hope you're all well. Yes, this is James O'Brien and Theo Usherwood's PMQs post-mortem, where we go through the wheat from the chaff, and usually before the PMQs, ask James O'Brien will ask Theo, what do you think they'll go on? And they basically thought that they might go on about this point where the government had illegally broken the law in, apparently this protective ring on care homes, and he also thought that they would go on about this ridiculous notion about having MOTs every 2 years. And the thing is, they also got on about this rather disgusting tale about that's in the Mirror about some perv in the government perving over porn movies while in the House of Commons. Well, what do you expect from this government led by a bloke who basically can't keep his willy in his pants at the best of times? So what do you expect? But anyway, let's get on to the post-mortem, because it's truly fascinating.
22 minutes after 12, so no protective ring, but the MOT's got a mention. Well done, Theo Usherwood.
The focus, of course, from Keir Starmer is to try and link the cost of living crisis, what everybody's feeling in their pockets when it comes to the rising cost of energy, the rising cost of fuel, and, of course, inflation as well, to link that to the government's, as Keir Starmer sees it, mismanagement of the economy. What he doesn't want retort you heard from Boris Johnson is for Boris Johnson to say, well, actually, this cost of living crisis is a result of global inflation around the world, which is outside of our control and is large part down to the war in Ukraine, and to somehow circumvent the fact that there are decisions, this is Keir Starmer's point, made by the government that has made this cost of living crisis worse, and that the government, and this is where the MOT point comes in, doesn't have a clue about how to actually alleviate the problems that people are facing, and that's why they've come up with this MOT fix, where it's going to go from every year on a car more than 3 years old.
That's not going to happen, though, is it? I mean,
Grant Shapps was talking very positively about that idea this morning, but it doesn't really touch the sides.
But Grant Shapps talking very positive. He talks very positively about Boris Johnson having got all the big calls right, and we know that's not true. So it's hardly a ringing indoors. Aren't these just sort of desperate suggestions from a desperate cabinet about a desperate situation?
Yes, but that they could still happen.
Maybe scrapped.
But they're scrabbling around looking for ideas, and of course,
where do you get 50p a week from?
So it's £55 a year for an MOT.
That's £1 a week.
No, divide it in two, because of course you no longer pay.
So it would be for 2 years, so you say 50p.
£27 £27 a year, you say. So then that would of course work out at around £2 a month, which is 50p a week.
The mind boggles, doesn't it?
But the point is, and this is what Keir Starmer's saying, for somebody who's seeing their shopping bill, he didn't say this explicitly, this is the point that Labour's making more generally, and you, of course, heard from Ian Blackford talking about the rise in food banks and people having to resort to help, emergency help in order to feed themselves and their children, is that this they're talking around the sides of the issue when they're talking about things like MOTs, making them every couple of years, because that's not going to have any material impact for millions of families who are seeing their shopping go up by £5-10 a week.
No, and that situation's getting ever more serious. Was Starmer right? I presume he was, because he's careful about these things. When he talked about them not seeing it coming and claims that inflation wasn't going to go up and stuff like that, it's not a great look, is it? And
he described him as the comical alley of the cost of living crisis, which takes us back to the second Gulf War, and of course Saddam Hussein's Minister for Propaganda, who insisted that the Iraqi government was winning in that conflict. But the point that Keir Starmer is making is that actually the government could have been making decisions much earlier in this crisis. We saw, of course, with inflation at 3% in September, and of course the government in the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and at one point Boris Johnson turned around, I think, and he pointed to Nazim Zahawi, the Education Secretary, and said, "Oh, there's my Chancellor." The Chancellor wasn't actually at the Prime Minister's side.
Do we know why?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can try and find out for you.
No, I don't. Well, I mean, I don't care. But not enough for you to put your.
But he should be. The point is that he should be there, and of course, every prediction was that we were going to see significant inflation. Of course, we had the shortages of petrol through the autumn, the early part of the autumn. The forecasts were there that inflation was going to go up, and then even when the Chancellor had the budget. Had his budget in March, he didn't even decide to rate. He didn't even decide to link the uprating in universal credit to the current inflation of 6-7%, but kept it at 3% from last September, so that people on universal credit are worse off.
Also, if they extend MOT tests by 12 months, then no one will need one until this time next year. It's quite bad news for people running mechanics, car mechanics, isn't it? I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, but you know what? I might do that as a topic. We might have a little look at whether or not people. There's a few areas. We've got less frequent MOTs, changes to childcare rules, and farming fertiliser. We may have a look at people in those sectors and ask them whether or not they think these are good ideas. Pippa Crerar of the Mirror has just dropped a rather worrying story.
Yes, she has dropped a rather worrying story on. Now, this relates to. It's an exclusive story from Pippa at the Mirror, and she's spoken to sources around a dozen women MPs at a meeting, shared accounts of alleged sexism and harassment of their colleagues. This was a meeting of Conservatives last night. A Tory frontbencher, the allegation is, was watching pornography on his mobile phone whilst
Just slow
in
down
the house.
A bit. Say that again.
A Tory frontbencher. So that.
Yeah. Means a minister, doesn't it?
Minister,
a member of government.
Member of government, but not necessarily a member of the cabinet. So the frontbencher was watching porn on his mobile phone in the House of Commons while sitting alongside a female minister. Now, from what people are saying, the shocked minister then told colleagues about the incident, which is said to have happened within the last few months, at the meeting last night. And Chris Heaton-Harris, the chief whip, is said to now be investigating exactly what has gone on. But of course, you heard at the beginning of PMQs Keir Starmer's comments about misogyny and sexism in the House of Commons, and of course that was in direct response to what happened at the weekend with the publication of that story in the Mail on Sunday, which was briefed by Conservative MPs that Angela Rayner was moving in order to distract the Prime Minister. So
nicely put. It is of a piece. And Dirty David Dillon, the editor of the Mail on Sunday, has declined the Speaker's summons to explain himself.
So, he won't be appearing in front of the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and we may get a point of order towards the end of PMQs now from the Speaker in response to that decision by the Mail on Sunday editor not to sit down with the Speaker and talk through the issues that he has.
The news that the Conservative Chief Whip, Chris Heaton-Harris, is investigating reports that a Tory frontbencher watched pornography on his phone in the Commons chamber dropped almost at the moment Boris Johnson described his government as being completely focused on delivering on the people's priorities.
Yes, so
can one be both?
So what often happens in debates in the House of Commons, James, is that you will have, or departmental questions, is that you will have the ministerial team sitting behind the Secretary of State, who will sit generally in the centre, and then they will take turns to answer questions of Labour MPs, of SNP MPs, indeed of their own side, about what their department is up to, or if they're having to give a statement. And that would be where you would expect everybody to be focused on the job of answering concerns that MPs have, or giving them the answers that are seen as adequate by MPs as to exactly what their department is up to or not up to, and how they're ensuring the smooth running of a Whitehall machine.
Is it possible, Theo Usherwood, that by deploying their smartphone to explore darker corners of the internet, this Conservative frontbencher who is being investigated or over allegations that he watched pornography on his phone, could he have been doing his homework after some technology lessons?
No, I don't think so, James.
You don't think so? Because, of course, when Boris Johnson was visiting the flat of his mistress, Jennifer R. Curie, he told us that he wasn't up to no good or engaging in any of his serial sexual incontinence, he was having technology lessons. So, I mean, if it's good enough for the Prime Minister, it might be good enough for this minister that he appointed to claim that his disgusting behaviour was actually a consequence of technology level lessons rather than simply being disgusting. You hate these moments, don't you?
If I remember correctly...
Hates them.
If I remember correctly, the Prime Minister, when he was the Mayor of London, was cycling, was not in City Hall, so he
wasn't on the job, so to speak, when he was on the job.
So he would there'd be the business of what was going on in City Hall, and then the technology lessons should be extracurricular.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Theo Usherwood, as ever, walking a tightrope. Not next week, because we're not having PMQs next week, because Boris Johnson, for reasons that he hasn't really shared, has decided to prorogue Parliament early. As I said earlier, I suppose we should be grateful that at least this time he's not done it unlawfully.
Very interesting. I love adding. I picked up on that comical line. I thought that was pretty good, actually. But I was also quite surprised when nobody mentioned about this government had been found guilty of breaking the law when it came to this protective ring with the care homes. But that's not all. I'd say I'm going to leave it here while it's brief, but because there's another video coming out very soon today where a certain MP called Daisy Cooper, a Liberal Democrat for St Alban, she brought up that question. She was a very last question in PMQs, and what Theo Usherwood had to say about that was very interesting. Right, I shall leave the video here because you'll have gone on long enough. So until the next time, I shall bid you farewell and take care.